Everybody can hear us, right? Okay, great. Yeah, so this is Perspectives on Risk Management. The description on the website says, like any market, the crypto market presents risks, and I think that seems like a huge understatement. I'm Bailey Reutzel. I've been in the space for about 10 years. Since 2012, I've been a journalist in the space, and I have lost lots of money, actually, in crypto. And so the risks here are very huge, and not just to hacks and thefts. But not to worry, we are both going to pour one out for everybody who has lost some crypto at the happy hour. But also, my distinguished panel here is going to be talking about how maybe, we can manage our risk a little bit better. So, in no particular order necessarily, we have Chen Arad. Did I nail it?
You nailed it.
Okay, good. He is the co-founder and CEO of Solidus Labs. We have Jon Knipper. He is the Senior Director of Treasury at Republic Crypto. We have Matt Dobel. Did I say that right?
Got it.
Awesome. He is Business Development at Gauntlet Network. And Omer Goldberg. He is the CEO of Chaos Labs. So, we only have 35 minutes. We're going to jump right into this. I want to start with the most important question. This means that you are a full degen and have been in crypto long enough. Have you lost money in crypto? We're starting here.
I bought ETH at $60 and sold it at $30.
Okay, yeah. I bought, this has nothing to do with the panel, actually, so sorry for the digression. I bought into the pre-sale and then sold at $7. So that's my horror story. Yes.
So that's actually how Chaos Labs started.
Yes,
I left Instagram to build like a yield maximizing protocol. And I was seeing everybody get wrecked. And I was like, damn, I can't have this happen on a large scale. So that's the genesis story of Chaos Labs.
Okay. Shin.
First of all, if I may point out, I don't think it's a real crypto or DeFi forum if there aren't a bunch of names that are hard to pronounce, or at least not straightforward, so good for us. I have lost money. Not that much. I think it's fair to say that I lost more on the money that I didn't invest than on the money that I did invest.
Okay.
You're in a good state.
Yeah, I've been rug pulled, liquidated, you name it. So have definitely been through the trials and tribulations.
Awesome. So I asked this question because I sort of want to segue, and I'll go ahead and start with you, Omer, since that was your origin story. But just in losing money in crypto, how has that changed your view of risk management?
So before Chaos Labs, I was at Instagram and Facebook for a bunch of years, working on different parts of the application. And I was really shocked when I came into DeFi, just how low the bar was for security and how little testing there was. So for me, since I've come in, I think the more that I understand, the more that I see that it's still very, very greenfield. And I think what Chaos Labs is all about is bringing the tools that are considered mandatory and things that you wouldn't go to production, like in a Web 2 world, into Web 3, and help manage and mitigate the risk in that form.
Chen, what about you?
So, Solidus Labs, our company is a crypto-native market integrity hub. We started focusing on market surveillance and market manipulation, but today we really offer the foundation for a thoughtful, comprehensive, and future-oriented risk and compliance program. And really, the reason we do what we do is because, and kind of connecting it to your important question, is that the opportunity here is so big, but it would not be fulfilled without much more effective risk monitoring on the one hand, because, at the end of the day, as accessible as many DeFi services and places you could put your money are, is it really accessible if, my grandmother trades on it and, potentially gets 20% cut off the bottom and 20% off the top? And not only that it's necessary in order to enable the potential, there's also a massive opportunity here, because crypto is not just transforming financial services and DeFi, of course. It's also providing a real opportunity to transform financial risk monitoring and the way that it's been done in the past. And it's also, it meets regulator in a reality where regulators understand that the way they supervised financial services so far is not going to be sufficient here. So there's a real openness to also evolving the way financial services are regulated. And, that's kind of like the triangle that we operate in.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Like, I want to bring up that there are just so many different types of risk in this space. So there's smart contract risk, there's economic and governmental, so you were talking about regulatory risk. There's plain old theft, which we've seen a lot of, especially in the NFT space recently. Even like big name, long time crypto people are getting, rug pulled, definitely.
Right.
But also getting spoofed through their email. And so I guess I want to talk a little bit about how all those risks sort of come together in the way you think about it, and maybe I'll hand this off to you. It's just, what kind of risks, also what kind of risks are the most important to your clients? So what are they coming to you asking you to help with?
So everyone on this panel addresses sort of a different aspect of risk, and they're all very important, right? So Chen was talking about sort of your transactional risk, and Omer was talking about your maybe environmental risk and where your protocol is acting. My focus is more on maybe price risk. So if you own an asset or a portfolio of assets, what is an appropriate way to balance them? How would you weight your assets? My background is from a traditional finance background, so I will look at things from a volatility adjusted basis. So $1 of stablecoin is worth $1, but if Bitcoin moves on average 4% a day, maybe you want to hold a little bit less of that. Ether moves on average 6% a day. Avalanche moves even more than that per day. Just to give you some comparison, like US stocks move on average 1% a day. So taking some just basic tools to apply that to a portfolio so that you don't get blown out by one position moving against you is part of it. But also, how can you develop those tools to be easy to use and get into the hands of ordinary retail investors so that so they're nudged in the right direction, right? So they're making good choices. I mean, all of it ties together, right? You need to have good wallets. The whole stack needs to work, but that's sort of my angle into it.
Matt, I'm going to throw it to you, but we are going to get back to UX and UI because this is something I rant about all the time. It's just like really terrible in the crypto space, although I know we're working on it. But Matt, I'll throw it over to you. Just kind of talk about the risks that your clients are coming to you with and how that explains how you think about risk in the crypto space.
Sure, yeah. A lot of our clients are pretty large money markets. So we're fortunate to work with BenKey on Avalanche, who's a great partner of ours. And I think one thing they focus on is economic and volatility risk, to John's point. So what we really do is use a lot of off-chain agent-based simulation to help understand, if the price of these assets drop X%, what is that going to do to the platform in terms of solvency? And, how can we find that balance between risk and capital efficiency that they can grow, but still, grow in a managed and a methodical way?
I mean, what is your suggestion there to them then in terms of like holding crypto versus holding something that's more stable?
In terms of holdings, I think from a protocol team perspective, the treasury diversification we could go on and on about in terms of another topic, but in terms of like what they're holding or the assets they're listing, just really understanding the risk of each particular asset and how it can be affected by different market moves. And so, we've been fortunate where a lot of our teams come from trading or high frequency trading, and if you come from that background, you really understand when you're running these simulations, it's not just like what could happen in the average case. It's also what could happen in the edge case, the worst case, and really, we run anywhere from 10 to 20,000 simulations a day to really understand what these parameters need to be set at. So not only your typical retail trader or yield farmer can come on, but also getting institutions more comfortable and helping them understand how to interpret this.
Yeah, fair enough. Omer, I want to pass it to you on that because I know you guys do a lot of recreation of these blockchain environments as well. Sort of talk about what you had touched on. There are just standard security practices in, like, let's say a Web 2 world that are not around in a Web 3 world. So like, what are those? And I guess why aren't they such a big deal in the Web 3?
So first of all, the surface of security in Web 3 is much, much larger than Web 2. So like if we just look at a simple analogy like a bank, if someone's trying to attack a bank today, it's mostly a black box, right? They don't know what the source code is for the bank. It runs on a private server. What they do know is they can provide the bank's APIs or endpoints with specific endpoints and start observing what happens. This makes it a lot harder for attackers. And then you see them get creative in different ways, like phishing or just obtaining credentials. We saw recently with OpenSea. In Web 3, everything is open and introduces a whole slew of risks. So just a few of them off the top of my mind. Smart contract risk, right? So you can see all of the code, you can see all of the public interfaces, and you can start thinking how to interact with them. It gets even worse when you have an audit. Why? If you're an attacker, just go see what the auditors did, and from that you can understand what they didn't test. So that's a good place to start from there. Oracle risk. We see that all the time, right? Are you using an Oracle that has a single source of data? Maybe it has two. Are those sources of data with sufficient liquidity if it's for pricing? That's a big risk that's not in your application's control. So you need to guard against that. Government risk, right? Somebody can obtain, let's say you have a token with a low market cap, or even a big market cap where it's worth doing something like this. Get enough governance tokens, start passing new resolutions into the protocol that are in your favor. And then obviously there's market risk, which Matt was speaking about, right? Crypto, like, it's super volatile, we all know that. What does that do to your protocol? So if you're a lending protocol, what are the situations in which you're gonna go insolvent, right? And so it's not only just a simple math problem, because in crypto everything is so correlated, right? So you have one asset that's going down, that's going to affect a bunch of others. You need to account for that as well. So a ton of risk, and we try to address each of them in a different way. On a very, very high level, what we believe in is dynamic application security testing versus static. So static would be an audit, which is great, but it's just reading through your own code. But in DeFi, we talk about composability, money Legos. So it's not enough to look at your own code, because your own code could be good. But if you look at the real exploits that are happening on a day-to-day basis, it's mostly manipulation and kind of taking advantage of systemic risk. So that's how we view it, kind of like holistically.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting that you talk about like hackers just going to see what they did on the security audit. I had never thought about that. I don't know if y'all do this, but I've written a lot about bug bounties in crypto, specifically Immunify, just because I think they're sort of redefining what a bug bounty looks like. Some of the payouts on their platform are crazy. So I guess I want us to talk about how maybe security audits aren't enough, and are there these other pieces that DeFi protocols should also add to their suite of security? And if you want to go ahead, you sort of touched on this, so take it away, yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, it's clearly evident that audits are not enough, because there are amazing audit firms, and if you look at all of the biggest exploits, they've all been audited 5 or 6 times. So audits are not sufficient. It's necessary. Security is asymmetric, so the more eyeballs you can get on something, the better, but that's not enough. Today, it feels almost like a stamp, right? You go to all the top firms, you see in the GitHub the PDF, we did what we needed to do, and you still get wrecked, so it's not enough. The reason why it's not enough is because the cost of making a mistake in Web3 is so much bigger. At Facebook, Instagram, we had bugs all the time. What we would do is deploy a hot fix. Within 3 hours, our code was running on 1 billion devices. You're pushing immutable code to the blockchain. There's not a lot you can do. There are patterns to mitigate this, but because of this, the testing needs to be a lot more thorough. And it's not only when you make a new update or a version of your protocol. Protocols change over time, so you have governance proposals, right? Some protocols use proxy patterns, introduce completely new functionality on a bi-weekly basis. You need to test for that. You can't get an audit, right? You're gonna get an audit for 80 lines of code. It's for could be $200,000 to $400,000. So we need to give the developers, it's harder. The infrastructure, the architecture is more challenging, but they need the same tools that you would have in Web 2. Continuous integration, continuous testing. The last thing I want to say about this, if our team is all ex-Israeli cyber intelligence, Apple, Facebook, Instagram, if we went to our offices and we were working on a feature and we said, I think I'm done, can we bring some people to find bugs in my code? And they found bugs in our code. It'd be like a disaster for all those engineers. So the developers need to take more responsibility, but they can only do that once they have the tools and the platforms.
Oh, that's a really interesting point. I don't think crypto developers do take a huge amount of responsibility, sorry. Well, maybe it's just the crypto space in general. It's like always pushing responsibility or blame off onto other people.
Software, right?
Yeah, right. So work on that, all of you. John, I'm gonna sort of pass that same question over to you if you want to comment on it.
Well, I don't have anything on bug bounties per se, but I mean, your market risk is not just price goes up or down, right? There are many, many types. There's your counterparty risk, liquidity risk, right? If you're using a bridge, what type of bridge, et cetera. You may think you have your funds locked in some pool and you're earning a great yield, but many things along that chain of events can go wrong. So, yeah.
Chen, do you want to comment on this?
Well, I guess not specifically. I mean, I also think that Omer covered it really well. But I think there are two big changes that at least I see in the way crypto forces the world to think about financial risk monitoring. One of them, and Omer alluded to that, is a shift from static to dynamic, from periodical to continuous. And there's a real opportunity to do that with modern technologies that do that, but that also enables the next shift, because and the other big shift, and it's a tectonic shift, is there's an opportunity to finally switch from a point of entry, a risk monitoring perspective, where you basically limit most of your risk by being very, very selective in who can participate, right? You essentially, in traditional finance, you kind of have a bouncer at the entrance, and that bouncer has a checklist of basically binary things, and he kind of checks you out. It's basically financial racial profiling to a degree, and that's even true in very advanced economies where people use credit cards and most people have access to a bank. It's obviously much more true in places where people are unbanked. Now, that gives regulators and generally people more comfort that you only let certain people in, so it's less likely that something wrong will happen, and then you kind of retroactively look if something happened that was wrong, and you kind of do your best to threaten, to enforce against it so other people don't do it. But a lot of what we're doing with our clients is beginning to just in real time monitor, and to do that we rely on the other shift, which is a switch from disparate risk management, where you manage different kinds of risk on separate systems with separate analysts at separate stages, moving towards having all of that data in relation to a particular account, trader, user in one system. And then you can start to become, as you continuously monitor, you can start to become much more fluid and surgical. And instead of keeping people out, you can say, okay, something weird happened here. You should look into that. And then within that, you can, that way you allow regulators and the platforms to allocate their investigative resources much more, in a much more educated manner. And then you can do a deeper investigation and really, in real time, focus on a particular account that is behaving oddly. The next stage to that is also a big question around identity-based versus behavioral-based risk. And obviously, when everything is on a blockchain, and regulators now understand that they're much better with assets that are on a blockchain in terms of being able to recover them if they were stolen than they were with suitcases full of dollars. So you can actually maybe start to envision a reality where it's kind of like a driver's license. You don't check in every time you use the road. You have some sort of basic training. And if you do something wrong, then there's an ability to detect you and kind of intervene. So sorry, it was a bit of a long answer, but those I think are kind of like the broad strokes of where risk monitoring is going, thanks to crypto.
Yeah, I mean, even as we were talking outside, what you were saying, I really like. So it's basically like open up the system instead of gating people at the door. And I guess one of the questions that I would pose, or one of the things that worries me as I keep seeing crypto go mainstream, is that we're kind of just recreating the old systems, right? So if the idea is that you're gating people at the front door, and maybe you're closing off people who are trying to get out of Russia right now, who are just individuals, but sanctions are what they are. You can close off hackers, and then you can also close off people who we are trying to help who can't get regular financial services. And so this idea that you could create an open system where then you just monitor whether they do something wrong, I really like that, right? And I think that sort of helps us move in the right direction. Matt, I saw you nodding. I don't know if you want to speak to that particular point. It's just like, is crypto becoming lame if we have all these transaction monitoring services on top of it?
Yeah, I don't think we're becoming lame. I think we're just growing up. I think as the space gets bigger, we're going to see more attack vectors and more areas for people to come in and penetrate. As market caps grow, as TVLs grow, it becomes very attractive for somebody to come in. I think in regards to an open system, to your point, it's really tough to discern at the gate like who should come in and who shouldn't. So I think services like this are super important because we don't want to close off people, and we don't want to start acting in a centralized manner where we're deciding who gets to participate and who doesn't. It's more so when somebody comes in, let's decide if they're a good actor or not and proceed accordingly.
Yeah. Also, you said we're growing up, which usually adults are seen as lame over kids. I'm just saying.
I was going to agree that they're positively correlated, getting older and getting lamer. I can attest to it.
Right. So I think we are becoming lame, but maybe it's okay. Like maybe we can just become lame in a better way.
Well, I think, so first of all, I think that at the end of the day, there's a really good reason why nowhere in the world do people vote in libertarian governments. And there's a reason why none of us will enter an autonomous vehicle before some authority that we trust said that the brakes work, right? I think that it doesn't mean that decentralized, it's the opposite. The merits of decentralization are clear. They will just not be able to reach their potential and serve people in a safe way if we don't mitigate them. And the key of risk monitoring in crypto is creating risk monitoring so state-of-the-art, so advanced, that it actually doesn't limit those abilities. I will say, though, something that was interesting to me, when we increasingly work with decentralized platforms and services, and what was very interesting is that oftentimes when you sell compliance or regulatory-oriented products, you very much focus on the legal argument. You should do that because otherwise you'll find yourself with a big fine or worse. What was really interesting for me personally, starting in the past couple of years when we started working more with decentralized platforms, is that it didn't really interest them as much. I mean, obviously part of it is because they don't feel they have that risk, but they are much more focused on user experience, on really making sure that we're actually using this technology to create better financial services for everyone, because otherwise, what's the point? So I actually think we're awesome, not lame. I mean, by that I mean crypto and DeFi.
Yeah. John, do you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I like the example of an electric vehicle or an autonomous vehicle, right? I mean, the idea is that the space should become safer in all of these different aspects over time, and all of your companies are building tools to make it safer, right? So there are less rug pulls, there's less antagonistic trading environments, right? So that protocols can be properly tested before they're deployed. And I guess from my perspective, to add to that, to have your average retail trader or investor have the tools by default to properly, say, risk manage a portfolio. There's a reason that those don't come out of the box, with your exchange account. It's because it's more profitable for them to, to watch you YOLO your money on 100x levered JPEGs, right? But to have a safer space, right, you would have more freely accessible tools to build, a proper portfolio and properly risk manage your assets too. So that's where our heart's at.
Do you want to add? It felt like you were trying to add.
Just like something small on this, which I think is really cool because we can only do it because everything is open. So I think when you have like certifications, like with an autonomous vehicle or in a centralized like kind of financial service, you have like a 3-lettered organization that tells you, hey, this is safe or this checks out. But in crypto, like not only can our companies, like we can say that once we look at the software, but there's also an element of verifiability, right? And that's what we're working on, is that not only do we want to say like, here's the report and like just trust us, it's good, you can like ape into this. What if we could make the reports openly accessible to the community? And you didn't have to take our word for it. You could run the code, see everything that's running yourself, and kind of verify it in that manner. So I think that's something that's going to be really new and special to Web3 because of the open nature.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to talk about, I'm going to start with you, John, but in terms of seeing startups sort of come to you, I guess there's this push and pull in the crypto space. Crypto moves so fast, and so it's like, we got to get our platform out right now. Like, we don't have time for security. We don't have time for audits. So I guess, like, how do you talk to your startups about just slow down, it'll be okay, your token is still going to 10x if you just take another month?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of strategy that goes into a well-managed and well-run, new token offering. So Republic Crypto, is a team of advisors who do take nascent projects through the advisory process of token design, tokenomics, and then designing a listing sort of strategy. And then, after that, so you've raised your 10 million or you've raised your 100 million, what should you do with your treasury, right? How can you diversify it? I remember in the ICO boom of 2017-18, how many good projects with like good engineers kept all of their assets in ETH, and their 5-year runway collapsed to a 5-week runway, right, and then they were out of business, right? So how can we give people the tools so that doesn't happen again? Is sort of an important question.
And the answer is?
Well, we're working on building those tools and giving you those tools. I mean, I guess another another risk which you touched on was that things are really quite correlated too, right? That you know, price goes up and price goes down, but unless you've been living under a rock for the last month, you know, there is a war, you know, breaking out, and that commodity prices are spiraling, and central banks around the world are beginning to tighten, right? Which is the equivalent of removing the punch bowl from a party, right? And believe it or not, that will affect the price of your JPEG. And so tracking these correlations and putting a framework in place, and again, providing that to your average retail investor, I think is an interesting question.
Yeah, fair enough. Matt, I want to pass that to you as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think in terms of risk, and I think Omer put it pretty well, it's not just about the black box that is risk and managing that for protocols themselves. It's also furthering the education and understanding of the market as a whole. Whether that be, you know, your average retail trader, whether that be an institution. You know, our mission at Gauntlet is to, you know, advance the understanding of the financial systems of the future. So that is really what we're focused on. And so, you know, in addition to the risk management services that we're providing, you know, looking at the assets and maintaining, you know, risk management and capital efficiency, we're also putting out client dashboards. You can, you know, find them on our website, really understand and drill down to the asset level, both like why we're setting collateral factors the way they are, why liquidator incentives are where they are, and looking at some other factors too, such as, you know, the volatility of those assets. And so, you know, really, we're not just going to tell you what to do, but we're going to show you exactly why we're doing what we do and also provide the methodology for it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I want to talk about UX because I love this topic. And I know this is kind of like not the topic of interest for this particular panel, but it sort of overlaps because I think there's, you know, there's risk that your UX is so bad that somebody pushes the wrong button, right? A lot of what I do in the events and journalist space is basically walk people through how to play with some of these platforms. So like how to start staking on AVAX or whatever it might be. And a lot of the times people just want to be handheld through that process because it is scary. It's like, I don't know, if I push that button, do I lose all my money? So I guess, Omer, I'll throw it to you, just because you worked at Instagram. Like, how do we get crypto to the place that's like Instagram, except maybe not as addictive?
So well, I think fundamentally the challenge here is harder, just because, you know, you need to, for the UX to be good, you need to abstract technology, which is like complicated. And if you abstract too much, you know, there's also a downside to that. Having said that, there is a lot of work, right? Like wallets are getting better. It's not what it was in 2017, surely not in 2014. Our take on it is a bit different because we want the UX to be really good for the people who are consuming our insights and analytics. So it's like if we go and we kind of like understand exactly what the black swan events are or the market conditions are that are going to wreck a protocol, but the founders or the community don't understand, then did we even do anything? So that kind of plays into it as well. We need to make things accessible. I think the general direction is better in crypto, but we still have so much for retail, right, left to go. And things are not, I think most people still don't really understand, you know, what they're doing. Room to improve.
Chen, do you want to take this question as well?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I mean, we hosted, my CEO hosted a fireside chat with Sam Bankman-Fried about 6 months ago, and it was focused on DeFi. And Sam said something that I think is just it sums it all. And he said that at the end of the day, the future of DeFi, is it going to manifest its potential? It's all going to depend on one thing. Are we going to provide good products? And a big part of good products is the fact that they have good UI. So it really depends on that. I do think we need to remember that we're still at a very, very early stage. I mean, if this is the new internet, we're in the late 80s at most, right? When I first heard the phone-based modem screeching at my parents' house, I did not realize that 20 years later I'll be talking to my mom on another continent as if she's in the room. These things will evolve over time, but we as an industry need to focus on it. We need to remember, if I may quote Lizzo, the singer who quoted Bill Gates, we tend to overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years. And that brings me to the last question, and it kind of connects to my last point, and it kind of connects to your last question as well. And that is, you know, a big question is, you know, are you here for the long run, or are you here because there's an amazing bull market and, you know, suddenly CNN is reporting about crypto? And I think we all need to constantly ask ourselves, and it's true about risk and security and safety, and it's true about developing good UI and UX and good user experience. You know, are we here just to make money, or are we here to make money and make a difference? It is finance at the end of the day. Money is a big part of it, but are we here also to really make it better? And if we are, we need to think about all of those things all the time and understand that it's a long game. And you know, like, and also look at some of the kind of failures of technologies that were really promising but not tested enough, like social media, for example. I don't know if Facebook is going to be remembered as a good thing in history. And part of the reason is because it became too big, too fast. There was too much opportunity, not enough checks and kind of stops, and ultimately it resulted in elections that are being, you know, affected and stuff like that. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me again that we should also be making a difference. I think it's so easy to be black-pilled in crypto really fast. And what I mean by that is, like, we're only here for the money. You know, I did not get in initially for the money, but it becomes easier and easier every year, I feel like, to just be like, well, I don't know, you know, you make some money, everybody's got to make money. So thanks for reminding me and everybody else here that we need to be making a difference. We only have a minute, and I want to ask maybe a silly question to everybody. Matt, I'm going to start with you. In the next, let's say in the next year, what is the most at-risk category in crypto for a huge security failure?
I think it's a great question. You'll probably get a different answer from all of us just because we all see it from a different perspective. And you know, I think you brought this up earlier, but looking at the multi-chain bridges that are getting built, and at least, you know, relating it back to Gauntlet and our perspective on it, it's really important to model the risk that these bridges bring as it relates to a lending protocol, for instance, and really looking at the assets you're listing on new either layer 1s or layer 2s, and what is the depth of liquidity of that bridge and where it's getting bridged to. You know, if it's a new layer 1 or layer 2, you know, where do you liquidate that asset on that? You know, is there a centralized exchange? Is there a DEX being built? And typically on these, you know, the DEXs are a lot smaller. So in terms of a big liquidation, you're not going to be able to handle something like that. So, you know, from our perspective, it's really focusing on, as the industry expands outwards, how can we continue to account for that risk, you know, in the form of, you know, liquidity, depth of liquidity, and so on.
Okay, yeah, Chen.
When I don't want to give a definitive answer, I usually refer to scripture. What does the Jewish Talmud say? That prophecy has been given to the fools. I mean, I agree with Matt that, you know, you need to look really carefully into what you invest, but you also need to keep in mind that there's so much opportunity here that it's very, and risk is at the end of the day a function of also potential gain. So you need to balance those, you know, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's also a really good point, because, you know, all of your shitcoins will go up eventually. At least that's what I've learned from holding tokens since 2012. Just keep holding them. Omer, go ahead.
Just really quickly to touch on what Matt said. So I think earlier this year, MEV got a lot of attention on Ethereum as it was taking up block space and blowing up gas prices. I think that the opportunity for multi-chain MEV is much, much, much larger. And speaking of UX, that's like the buttons might look good and you might understand what's happening, but it's not a good UX to get wrecked. So I think that there's going to be need like more tooling to kind of mitigate that and protect users, because the opportunity is huge.
Yep, great. And John?
I think the bedrock foundations are sort of stable coins need to continue being stable, and we need to avoid any sort of run on the bank scenarios, and we need to avoid nuclear war.
Yeah, that for sure.
And can I know we need to finish, but just one really important reminder, there's a lot of risk, a lot of market abuse, a lot of fraud in traditional finance as well. Let's not forget that. It's not exclusive to crypto. You know, traditional financial institutions get fined all the time for this kind of stuff. We're the new kid on the block. There's a lot we need to prove, and we're committed to proving it, but let us not single ourselves out in that sense.
Yeah, it's true. It's just because this is a crypto conference. Otherwise, I totally agree
100%.
with you. Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for being a great audience. Thank you, panelists. Great.